This podcast is made possible because of my wonderful patrons. I want to thank Randy Brown, Rob Barnett, Crystal Strong, Bella Pori, John Munson, Betsy Hodges, Levi Petrie, Stephen Malio, Steve Rogers, Dale Hozak, Terry Smith, Anna Lynn, Chris Bloom, and Mary Thomas. I appreciate all of y'all kicking in your hard-earned cash to help me spread the good news of Bruce Springsteen's music. I love y'all.
I really gravitated towards both equally. When I was 12, I got into the Police, and I really like Bruce Springsteen. I used to call myself, and this is no joke, I laugh at myself now, but I used to call myself Mrs. Spring Sting because I just loved Sting and the Police, and I loved Bruce so much. I was like, I can't decide. They're both Libras and they're both geniuses, and I just I just can't decide. So I'm Mrs. Spring Sting. Yeah.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Set Listing Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson. Tonight, we are getting off the Bruce Springsteen train, though he will probably come up as he normally does. I am having one of my fellow podcasters and writers join me, Jaclyn Johnston. Thanks for joining on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so tell us a little about yourself.
I am originally from Austin, Texas, and I am an author. I wrote 3 books, and I also work in academia. I work in the College of Medicine here in Cincinnati, Ohio, at the University of Cincinnati. And I also have a podcast. and my brand is called Manifest It. So the podcast is called Manifest It. And I recently started my sector, which is my publishing company, Manifest It Publishing. So I have a lot of hats that I wear. But yeah, first and foremost, I'm a writer, I guess, or author, as I would say. And I'm so thankful that you asked me to be on this podcast with you. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate you putting your podcast guest cap on, though I'm sure we'll switch back and forth. So that is great. So we talked a little bit before we recorded, but um, you you've missed the Austin summers, but now you're about to get Ohio winters, right? So is it a fair bargain?
I am actually allergic to the heat
Okay.
for real.
Okay.
So I've spent all of my life, I'm about to be 40. I've spent all of my life living in Texas, except for a few months I lived in Sweden.
Mhm.
And I was so glad when I moved up here last year to Ohio. The the winter is wonderful. I love it. I totally embrace the snow. And then people say, well, give it a couple of years. And then I always say, well, I'm allergic to the heat. So, it's just I have to say I do miss Austin. But Cincinnati, there's an area around here. It's called Over the Rhine, and there's an area here that is very similar to Austin. So it's still got that small town kind of vibe going on, whereas Austin
Yeah.
has just grown so much over the last 2 decades.
Yeah.
But um, yeah, I'm so glad I moved up here. Honestly, I do not miss living in Texas. It's weird to say that, but yeah, I don't. I think it's a great trade off for sure.
That is awesome. my wife and I, my wife has been wanting to live in Austin forever. We, we, I read this phrase once and I've just embraced it. You know, we are blueberries stuck in a strawberry field politically. Austin a little more in sync with a lot of, you know, that vibe. And, you know, if anyone's ever been there, there is this whole keep Austin weird, you know, vibe there. And the reality is, if you take away now, it's changed with Dell and all the other IT people, but for the longest time, people would say if you took away the state government and you took away the University of Texas, you'd have this small town left. You know, those two things are what makes it feel like a big city. But on that, now then with Dell and everything else, and you know, it is. I know there's a lot of traffic problems and there's a lot of issues with Austin, but I'm glad you've kind of found your own little niche for art and live music and everything up in Cincinnati. That's
Yeah,
great.
so yeah, I said when I visited up here the first time, I said it reminds me of Austin about 20 years ago.
Oh, cool.
And yeah, and funny enough that you mentioned Dell. When I was a kid and I lived in Austin, uh, my grandparents, one of the neighbors was Michael Dell.
Oh,
He would like go jogging through the neighborhood. Yeah. Yeah. So it we've always had Dell, even back in like the 80s and 90s, but it just, yeah, it wasn't so big. And now Austin is filled with skyscrapers. And I just remember 20 years ago when I was at UT Austin and it was my senior year at college and they were putting up the frost bank and it was going to be higher than the other buildings because there was this law that you couldn't have buildings higher than the Capitol. So UT's tower, it was on a hill, so technically it wasn't taller than the Capitol as far as the building goes. But the Frost Bank got built, and people were just so up in arms about it. They were so upset, and over the years, it's gotten more and more skyscrapers. I do miss that small town feel from 20 years ago. It's gotten more, yeah, I mean, I don't know. It has its pluses and minuses, but the traffic for sure, I definitely don't miss that. And
yeah,
I don't miss all the people everywhere downtown because when I was in college, it wasn't that crazy. Like Sixth Street was actually known as Sixth Street, and now my best friend who still lives in Austin, she says that people call it the Dirty Six now because apparently it's kind of gotten a bit dangerous down there. And I'm thinking maybe because of all these buildings that got put in and people just, yeah, just flocking to Austin for a good time and moving there and yeah, so I'm glad I found Cincinnati because like I said, it reminds me of Austin 20 years ago. So I still get that small town, vibe. The traffic here is great. I don't miss Dallas traffic at all either.
yes, that
And
is true.
yeah, I will say though, there is a bummer here. If there's a wreck, there's only two highways.
Right.
So if there's a wreck, there's no way to take a side street and get around. It's not like Dallas where everything's run north, south, east, west. It is like Austin a bit where it's circular, but there aren't as many like side streets to get where you need to go if you have to drive a long way.
Hmm.
So that is kind of a bummer when there is a wreck. And then the other thing that I don't like, which is so weird because I love everything about here, but I love animals, and so when I see wildlife on the side of the road, that's really hard for me to take.
Yeah,
But yeah, it's a great Cincinnati's a great city. I know people sometimes forget about Ohio because it's a swing state,
right.
but there's a lot of liberal people up here. So like I said, it reminds me of Austin and I
That's
feel at
awesome.
home. Yeah, I feel
That's
at
great.
home here.
That's great. But we have established you're a college football gal and UT remains you're not transferring to the University of Ohio or anything. You're a Longhorn forever.
I bleed orange. I bleed burnt
Awesome.
orange. Yeah.
Yes, that is great. All right, so growing up, I always like to start at the beginning, Jaclyn. So growing up, what kind of music did your family listen to? What kind of music did you listen to as a kid?
I am an only child. So I grew up listening to whatever my parents were listening to. And that mostly consisted of 60s and 70s music. My grandparents, they kind of liked that easy listening music, but I gravitated towards, yeah, 60s and 70s. And I also played clarinet for 10 years. So I loved classical music as well and jazz. So growing up, I basically I had a plethora of CDs, like a huge collection. Because by the time CDs were cool, I was in high school. And you had to have those books where you like flip through the CDs in your car to figure out which one you want to pull out of the sleeve. Yeah. And then my dad had a really great vinyl collection. So we listened to 60s, 70s. I really gravitated towards both equally. When I was 12, I got into the Police, and I really like Bruce Springsteen. I used to call myself, and this is no joke, I laugh at myself now, but I used to call myself Mrs. Spring Sting because I just loved Sting and the Police, and I loved Bruce so much. I was like, I can't decide. They're both Libras and they're both geniuses, and I just can't decide. So I'm Mrs. Spring Sting. Yeah.
I love that so much. That is hilarious. What when you can what about the Police? And then we'll ask you about Bruce. But what about the Police spoke to you? Why did you love that so much?
It's that reggae backbeat. That's
Okay.
what initially drew me in was the reggae backbeat. And then I love the bass. So obviously the bass rhythm and the lyrics as I got older. At 12 it was mainly the beats. But then when I got into high school and I started paying more attention to songs and their lyrics, I realized that Sting is just very gifted with lyrics, and he used to be an English teacher before he was famous. And I got my degree in English at UT, but he just is so poetic in everything that he writes. But he writes about things that are serious, serious matters that everybody faces. But the way he does it, he just does it with this wonderful finesse to it. And so that's what really got me into the Police, and even just Sting by himself. I saw him probably like 13 times in concert, and then I saw the Police twice.
Hmm.
And then with Bruce, it's that writing about people and living their lives. And with Bruce, it it wasn't just writing about what's happening in the world. It was literally giving a voice to the working man and woman, and literally kind of like this underdog, you know. I don't know how to describe it other than like I just feel like he's like the underdog voice for everybody, and including in some of his songs when he talks about love and like girls and things like that. it, it's just it's almost like you hear I mean, I know nowadays with music it's totally different with people singing about money all the time, and you know I don't listen to today's music, to be honest. So I have a hard time keeping up. Although I do love St. Vincent. I don't know if you know St. Vincent. She's from Dallas. She's her name's Annie Clark, but she goes by St. Vincent.
I will
She's
have
like
to check that out.
yeah, she's like a female David Bowie mixed with a little bit of Prince. And she did a tour with David Byrne of the Talking Heads a few years ago. And then her album, the new one that she released, Daddy's Home, you needed to check it out because it's a tribute and a throwback to 70s, like down and out. And she pays homage to like Pink Floyd and Stevie Wonder, and yeah, so she plays guitar, and she's really cool too. And she's a Libra, which is funny. I gravitate towards Libras, I guess. But yeah, there's just something about all three of these musicians that I just love their music, and it's always about society and people needing to be treated as equals and fighting for that equality and the justice, and I just really gravitate towards it because I'm the same way. I'm kind of a normal Ray. I just want everything to be equal for everybody.
Yeah. So kind of combine this. Did you said you were kind of finding the lyrics when you were reaching high school? Is that when you first thought you might want to be a writer? Is there a parallel there?
That's a really good question. I wrote poetry on my own in high school and college. I never published it. I have it in a Yahoo email. It's like in this folder from about 25 years ago. And yeah, I love to write. And as a kid, when I was in elementary school, I got third place. Was it third or second? I can't remember. But I got like one of those like scholastic writing award things as a kid. So I've always really liked writing, even though I love science equally. I'm an INFJ on the Myers-Briggs, which is that famous psychology test. And I basically utilize both hemispheres of my brain. So I grew up loving science as my favorite subject. And then when I got into college, I thought, okay, I want to do astronomy. I want to be an astrophysicist. And then my junior year in college, I said, you know what? I really love literature and I really love writing and the poetry and language. And so I switched last minute, which didn't go down too well with my grandpa, but it worked out. I mean, now I have the best of both worlds because I work in academia. I work for neurologists, and before I moved up here in Texas, I worked for physicists. So I have kind of the best of both worlds now.
Yeah. Now, are you a Libra?
I am not. I am a Pisces.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And why do you think you're drawn to Libras?
I'm drawn to air signs in general.
Okay.
I don't know why, but I get along with air signs
Okay.
really well. Are you an air sign?
I'm a Gemini. That's why I was asking.
Ah,
I was born
yes.
in
Okay.
June. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, my like most of my exes, although I don't have a lot of them, but
Yeah.
um, most of them are Gemini or Aquarius. But I had one Capricorn in there. But
Okay.
but yeah, I think that there's something with the Libra and how they're able to use their words and communicate in a way that draws in a lot of people because they're harmonious signs. They like peace and harmony,
Hmm.
but they're really good with communication. And so having a stance of like, I'm not going to be confrontational. I'm not going to like push my way to get myself heard. They just have a laid back and uh, very eloquent way of communicating to other people to get their points across. And they're also progressive. I mean, all air signs are progressive and innovative. So I gravitate towards Libras because I don't know, maybe because I'm an only child and I just do things my own way. And that's what Libras and Geminis and Aquarians do.
Okay.
But my rising, which is supposed to be like your other half of your personality, is
Okay.
Virgo. Virgo's earth sign. So maybe the mix of my Pisces water with the earth, maybe the air signs just kind of balance me out because I
Interesting.
do. Yeah, I didn't really like know all the ins and outs of all of that stuff, but then I had a reading done on my birth chart, like with the date and the time and the
Yeah.
location, and it was about an hour long, and the person went into details. They didn't know me, and they actually described me really well. So I just was surprised that, you can kind of get information like that from someone's birthday, location, and time. But I mean, I know that in history, people did use astronomy and astrology as a way to kind of gauge things in the world. So maybe there is something to it.
Mm-hmm. Huh, very nice. So I want to go back to writing. When when did you start writing a little more serious or knew you wanted to be a writer? You talked about you got your degree in English. Where did you think you're going to be a teacher? What were you thinking? And let's dwell on how did you decide you wanted to start writing?
Yeah. When I switched from and declared my majors as English, and then I did a minors in communication studies, I was thinking, this is a pretty broad degree. I could work like at any kind of, you know, company with this type of degree. I I wanted to be a teacher when I was younger, but I also wanted to be an astronaut. But since the astronaut thing didn't work out, I thought, oh, well, maybe I'll be a teacher. And then as I got into college and decided, okay, I'm definitely going to do English, I'm going to minor in communication studies. I wasn't thinking that I would be a teacher then. I just thought this is a good general degree and I could probably get a job at many companies with this type of degree. And so the writing part, as far as taking it like super seriously, that happened in 2017. I just told myself, I'm going to do it. I'm scared. I'm scared what the world's going to think of me. But over the years, my family just they were said, "You're a good writer. Like you should write a book. Why haven't you written a book?" And so I just took the plunge in 2017 and told myself, "What's the worst that could happen? Nobody buys it. People give it a bad review, and once again, nobody buys it. Like that's the worst that could happen." But I'm really glad I did it. I had no idea it was going to open up so many doors for me in a lot of things in the world. So I say to whoever's listening to this, if you have a goal or a hobby, there's something that you're passionate about, but you're scared about the reception of it, who cares? Like, you can be perfect and people will still not like you. And I learned that from the chairman of physics because I'm a recovering perfectionist. And he told me, you can be perfect and people are still not going to like you. And that really stuck with me because I thought, yeah, he's right. And then that's when I decided I'm going to write my book, and I'm glad I have 3 now, so I'm really glad I did it. I'm glad I listened to him.
What was the first book? And talk to me about that process of what because a lot of people go, oh, I know a lot of stories, I could write a book, but it's a lot harder than necessarily people say. So what what did you talk to me through that process?
Yeah, so everyone who asked me, how did you do it? And even now when there are clients that they email me and they're wanting to publish a book, but they're not quite sure if, what to do, where to start, if they're ready. And I tell everybody the same thing. Don't worry about chapters and getting them in order. Don't worry about a table of contents. Just get the content out on typed onto a computer. Just get it all out so to the point where your soul feels like, okay, I got everything I wanted to say out. And then after you do that, that's where the magic starts happening, because during the editing process, which is the most tedious and grueling process, I will not lie to you. But during the editing process, that's where you go and you make revisions and you start placing things in certain areas throughout we call it a manuscript before it's a book. And so that's why I say don't get hung up on the order or grammar or any of that at first. Just get the message out. Get the message out first and foremost, and then the editing will happen. And that's where the magic comes in, to really put in some extra ingredients to spice it up a bit and get it in the order that you want it to flow for the reader.
Have you read J. Michael Straczynski's Becoming a Writer, Staying a Writer?
No, I have
Okay,
not.
so um, I I've dabbled in writing like in high school. Like I was on the high school newspaper, and every once in a while I play around with a blog and I write emails to people, you know, doing stuff. Um, but I was fascinated, and he talks about editing. And
Mhm.
he actually, one of the chapters, he does the raw form and then shows all the edits he did. He actually, to show you how he got down and how many to do it. So I think you might enjoy that. It's a very fascinating book about writing and how to, and I agree with you, right? If this is, I tell people all the time, look, it's easy to podcast. And the reality is, if you get 10 downloads, if you get 1,000 downloads, if you're enjoying the conversation, if you're enjoying what you're doing about it, just don't worry about it. It's because that's what this should be about. If you're doing this because you want to make a ton of money and it doesn't bring you joy, it doesn't make any sense. Because
Right.
the reality is it's going to be very rare that you're going to come up with the next, you know, big, podcast that, you know, everyone's talking about. So I like your advice about that, you know, start writing. I remember once too, I can't remember if it was Lawrence Block or some other writer said, um, spend an hour a day writing. And if you can't spend an hour a day, write what was stopping you from writing, then put that down. And after a week, if you realize that it's all just excuses, quit kidding yourself and you're not a writer. You don't want to be a writer. And I really like that idea, the idea that, you know, and I often say that, especially in work when we're doing a document or something, I'm like, the first draft's the hardest. So just get the first draft and then send it off to someone else and go, okay, redline it, e-mine it, because I, there is no ego in this. We're just trying to get a good document. And so I think about that too. Did you did you always want nonfiction? Were you tempted to do fiction?
I think people who write fiction are incredibly blessed. I tried to do that a few years ago. It was in 2015. I tried to do a fiction book, and I got into the third chapter and I thought, this is not for me. It's just not. So I did the nonfiction because I have all these ideas and all these ways of approaching life and approaching the thought cycles. And so I just said, you know what? People come to me for advice. I'm I'm going to write but give advice to the reader by putting it all down on paper, or on a Word document. So I I agree, like the first draft is the hardest. And then I literally recommend getting an editor, like you said, give it to somebody, let them redline it. Nobody has perfect grammar. I mean, I'm pretty sure Stephen King probably still like flubs sometimes when he's writing things. So you got to get over that, because nobody's perfect. Take it from me, recovering perfectionist over here. I still have my slips, but I will say getting an editor, and you can find editors on Fiverr. It's Fiverr.com. You can find editors at good prices. Um, or yeah, go to a publishing company. It doesn't have to be like a huge one. It could be an independent publishing company like mine, my Manifest It Publishing. It's an indie company. I have a team, and we have editors, and we have the layout designers for the book, like actually putting the book together and the dimensions that it needs to be, and the manuscript for it to have the way it looks when you open the book or you open the ebook. So reach out to people, like you said. Give it to someone. You got the bulk of it done, which is you got that content out there, you got that message out there. And so from there, you just during the editing process, yeah, you just add a few more ingredients, you turn it into your own energy, and that's what people are gravitated towards anyway. I mean, earlier we were saying I gravitate towards Libras when it comes to music. It's because of their energy. It's how they deliver things. Same thing for when you're writing a book. People, you're gonna have, there's over 7 billion people on this planet. There's gonna be enough people who are going to like what you're writing. And you don't have to be at the tip top of the mountain. It's quite lonely up there, from what I've heard from people. So it doesn't matter if you make a mistake. You can correct it along the way. You can revise it. You don't have, even if you publish a book, you can still revise it and then republish another edition. Or just, I get new covers every few years, and nothing is set in stone. So that's why I say just go for it, because what's the worst that's going to happen? Like, nobody buys it, nobody reads it, or you get a few bad reviews. I've gotten bad reviews, and I still keep going, because guess what? You can be perfect, and there's going to be people that still don't like you.
You know, what I love in a few, gosh, this is probably over 10 years ago, but Brad Meltzer um, got a got people from his little league team and like his parents elder care facility to read the bad reviews that people had about him, and they filmed a video and he put it up, right? um so it I do know, being human nature, that I've had I guess about 60 or 70 iTunes ratings on Set Listing Bruce, but like the one that was a 1 star that says I repeat myself too often. Uh, I always think about that when I've told this story before, but the person I'm talking to has never heard the story. So I often say, okay, listeners, if you don't want to hear this again, skip ahead a few seconds, because most of my guests are like you may have listened to the podcast, you may have not, but we're having a conversation. So that's funny.
And for you to say that podcasting is easy, I'm sorry, I beg to differ. I mean,
Okay.
yes, it's easy to have a conversation, is what you were saying. So I
Right.
agree with that. But after you finish recording it and then you go to edit it, I mean, I have an editor, thank gosh. But when I was doing it on my own, it takes so long. And I don't think people realize how many hours it takes just to put on a 30-minute podcast or a 45-minute. It can take up to 6 hours of editing because it's not like a Word document where you can just like skim over it. You have to literally listen and go back and go back a little bit more to get where you need to edit it. Yeah, it's
So
a lot of work.
so tomorrow will be the 7th anniversary of me doing this. My first Set Leslie Bruce episode was September 8th, 2015. And I decided very early that I was going to not be the perfectionist, and I was going to leave all the uhs and stutters. And so when I try to listen to an episode and I try to clean it up, you're right. I mean, an hour conversation can take you 2 or 3 hours. So I decided long ago, to rely on the kindness of my listeners. And in fact, I will tell most people, I was like, okay, we're going to have a conversation. I will not do a lot of cleanup. If you said something you don't want me to have, then I'll certainly edit. But I did have one guest that was, you can't release this. I sound unprofessional. And so, and he kept sending it back like, no, I still have too many uhs. And I went, okay, this, that's not what this is. No one, I don't have any sponsors. I've got a very few people that are on my Patreon that are very kind to me. But you are correct. The biggest thing for me, and when I say it's easy to start, is the software, all that you can do pretty easy. I think the hardest part of podcasting is I spent 1 year as a life insurance salesman, and I was horrible at it. I sucked the worst I've ever sucked at anything in my life. But one thing you do when you sell insurance is you're always prospecting. As a podcast host, I am always recruiting. I am always looking for my next guest and making notes about what I can do, because like last month I did a John Hyatt month for a change of pace, and I had all the episodes about John Hyatt albums. And I look for other podcasters and writers to keep things going, because I don't want my listeners to go, oh, you're just going to have another white guy from the East Coast talking about Bruce Springsteen. Like, no, yes, there's nothing wrong with old white guys from the East Coast, and I love hearing their stories, but I love a diversity. So that part is where it takes time. And I have an Excel spreadsheet that lasts who I recorded and when I'm going to edit it and what I'm going to do. So I agree with that part of it. It can be very difficult.
Yeah, and you're right about the uhs and the ams, and I did all that. I took them all out in the first few episodes, and I just at one point I said, you know what? I literally could spend 6 or 7 hours per episode just editing the ums and ands and uhs. And I'm like you. I just said I got to get over it. I got to get over it, and I did.
And I do sometimes wonder, and boy, now we really are going behind the curtains, right? Like should all this be cut out of our discussion, right? Like to have this solid, a great 25-minute episode with Jaclyn Johnston, and I realize, but the going off on tangents is what I find interesting. And so you hope your guests go with you, your listeners go with you. Now, on the other hand, if you are doing a podcast about mental health or self-improvement, I think it could be tighter, right? It's a different thing than mine's a conversation. It is just, it's me getting to know a person, and hopefully I tell all my listeners, especially new listeners, I said, my hope is you feel like you're standing behind a couple of people in line to go see a Bruce show and you're eavesdropping. That's what I hope. So
Oh, that's good. Yeah, I will say I know exactly what you mean, because when I started interviewing Hollywood people on my podcast,
yeah,
they were some of the most, yeah, just let the conversation go. Because
right.
when I first started the podcast, I was so nervous. I was like, I got to stick to the questions, and then I found like these are the people. This is what they do all the time. They converse with people. This is their job. And so I agree with you. It's sometimes it's just better to let it go, and then you find golden nuggets throughout the recording, and then that's where you make your edits.
One of my favorite statements I get from a guest, especially, is they'll say, um, people have me on the podcast to talk about sports or to talk about business or to talk about my book. And I never get to talk music. Like, this was fun, Jesse. This was a change of pace. So I always hope that is going to be a thing. So now I want to know, though, let's go back to your first book. What was it? And you talked about the process, but you've got it, you're done. What was it? And talk about this manifested. What your brand, I guess, is the way it sounds like. Talk to me a little bit about that, Jaclyn.
Okay. So I was sitting at work, which was it. at UT well, it was UT Arlington at the time, and
Okay.
I was working with the physicist, and I thought to myself, you know, there's so many people that are spiritual, and there are people who are just the complete opposite and are like, no, science is facts, blah, 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 blah. And I thought, why not combine both? Because if the universe exists in the way that it exists, which means everything happens simultaneously, because particles are just constantly bouncing around and colliding with each other, and they take shape because the energy is influencing itself onto itself. And so I thought, well, I know that scientists in general are very black and white, yes or no, true, false, and then spiritual people are more, well, why not be accepting of differences, or it could be this way. So I said, I'm going to write a book and I'm going to combine both. And of course my editor said, let's not get too sciencey because you'll go over people's heads. So I decided that I would approach it from a psychological cognitive behaviorism standpoint. So I give people questions in the book to have a reflection. And I say, write it down, type it out on a computer. It's you and what your tool is to reflect, and the universe. No one has to know what you're writing out or typing out. It's literally processing your patterns of thinking, your patterns of entertaining your thoughts into feelings, your patterns of entertaining your thoughts into feelings, into actions. And no action is still an action, because in the universe, everything exists at the same time. So it's like when Einstein says, you look at the moon, but when you turn away, is the moon still there? Well, it just depends on the point of observation. What does the person choose to observe and therefore entertain that belief? And thoughts over time, it's not like a singular thing where it's not like a light switch where you just turn it on and off and you just go, okay, I changed my beliefs. It's literally practicing thoughts over and over again, and you shift them over time. You don't learn how to tie your shoe, you don't learn to ride a bike, you don't learn how to play an instrument or drive a car or whatever it is. Learn that your new phone, you don't learn all the ins and outs of your apps and settings just right away. You have to practice at doing something in order to get better. And so I always say practice makes progression, and progression brings the manifestation. And that's what manifestation is. It's literally emerging into your reality, but your reality is how you choose to observe it. So if people are constantly moping and walking around saying, oh, this person's so lucky, why doesn't this ever happen to me? I say, well, because this is what you're choosing to entertain over and over and over and over again. And so, therefore, the universe has no choice. The energy in the universe all around you, because we're not solids, we're tiny little bouncing particles that move around. You taking your mind, which is I can't say anatomically speaking, your your sight comes from your brain. It doesn't come from your eyeballs. Your brain is the projector and your eyeballs are the projection screens. So
Okay.
if you are constantly entertaining a thought over and over and over again, the majority of the time that you take a thought and entertain it, the universe is going to reflect it to you, because your billions of bouncing particles that are just vibrating all the time are taking shape. And therefore, your mind is saying, this is how I choose to see it. And that's what the universe is going to do. It's going to be influenced based upon the energy that you're putting out there, and then it's going to mold and take shape in the way that you expect it, or the way that you believe is the strongest possibility.
Jaclyn, is there something that you tend to see a lot of people do? Or like, is there a couple of things that you like? One of the things, right? Like drink more water. That's something we could all do to make ourselves more healthy, right? Like exercise 10 to 15 minutes a day or something like that. Are there things that you see that people could do to better manifest a more, you know, better life, a happier life?
Yeah. The first thing I recommend is taking an inventory of your surroundings and your support system. And when I say surroundings, I don't necessarily mean just the stuff in your home, although I think it is a great idea. There people have it spring cleaning, right? You don't have to wait till spring. I mean, energy is it takes up space all around us, and if you move that that stuff in your house, if you move it out of the way and make space for something new, something better, then that's what's going to happen. Something is going to come and replace that because you're open to it. So I always say start taking an inventory of not only your stuff around you, but even the people in your life. Who are you choosing to talk to and spend your energy with? Because that is going to influence you subconsciously and then eventually consciously. So start there. If there is anything in your home, wherever you spend the majority of your time, make it something that's, enjoying it. Like for me, I like to listen to music. So I bought an electric guitar during the pandemic because I was like, I don't know how to play it. I'm going to try. I still am not that good at it, but I like having an electric guitar in my living room. I want to look at it because it's beautiful and it makes me feel good. And then I listen to music and that makes me feel good. And same with people. There are people who are going to start out as positive people in your life, and then they may not be positive throughout your entire friendship or relationship. And that's okay because the only thing constant in the universe is change. And change is constant because energy does not sit still, it's always moving and colliding with itself. So you're allowed to let go of things and you're allowed to let go of people who no longer serve your soul's highest happiness.
Yeah, I do think that's great advice, that, surrounding yourself. One of my favorite lines is from Aaron Sorkin in Sports Night, and Robert Guillaume said it, but his character said, if you're dumb, you surround yourself with smart people. If you're smart, you surround yourself with smart people who disagree with you. And I've always used that as my business method. But I think you want in your personal life to have people that support you. I think people need to be realistic. And if I'm a 63-year-old guy, and if I go, I'm gonna join the NBA, well, hey Jesse, let's talk, okay? But there are also things that you want people to support your dreams and what you want to do and be positive. So I think that is excellent advice to make sure that people around you are making you happy, and are helping you to live your best life. And I know that's kind of a cliche, but it's true.
I mean, 63, you don't even look it. I thought you were like 54,
Oh,
55. I
thank you.
really
I appreciate that. That's very nice of you to say.
and, and
Yes,
speaking of that, age is just a number.
right.
And I have learned over my 40 years that laughter is the best medicine. So
Absolutely.
therefore, you want to surround yourself with people who make you feel good. And
Absolutely.
it's not up to them to make you feel good. It's up to you to make yourself feel good. And that means removing again people who are no longer serving you for your
Yeah.
highest happiness.
Yeah.
Same thing with the clutter or the stuff in your house. Like clutter actually brings more stress on a subconscious level. So don't get me wrong. I mean, I know that there's geniuses that have like the messiest offices and it works for them, but they're overall, their majority of people find that clutter just kind of is a big distraction subconsciously and it's harder to get things done. And so yeah, if I always tell people, if you want a relationship, you got to clear off some space on your bathroom counter for their space. You got to clear out some space in your closet for their space. You have to do that for the nightstand on the other side of the bed. If you want a new car, you got to clean out that garage and get rid of those boxes and make space for that car to sit there. There's literally things that you can do that say, hey, I'm open to this. I'm open and I'm ready to receive it. And you know what? It doesn't matter how it happens. It doesn't even matter when it happens. When you're loose about it and you're not like obsessed over the outcome, if you're just like, hey, I'm available for this, but I'm also available for something even better, then I would say 95% of the time, something better comes and it's way better than you imagined it to be. Just like earlier when I said, I'm going to publish this book and I have no idea what's going to happen. But like I said, it opened so many doors for me. And if I hadn't just said, you know what, I'm going to feel the fear and I'm going to do it anyway, then I wouldn't be where I am today.
I love it. I love it. Um, Gosh, I feel like we just started. Um, if someone wants to get more information, um, what's the best way to reach you and what's the best way to get more information about your books and your podcast?
Yeah, if you just go to themanifestit.com, then it'll take you to my website and you can click around and find what you're interested in, whether it is the books or you want to listen to the podcast or you have a dream to publish a book and you want to possibly um, work with us as a team to get your book published. Yeah, it's all there. And yeah, I mean, I manifested meeting Bruce Springsteen, exactly what I've been talking about. I had a dream and I woke up laughing because the dream at night was he pulled me up on stage and I was laughing the morning when I woke up and I was like, oh, right, like that's ever going to happen. Right. And no joke, 1 month later to the very day, 1 month later, he pulled me up on stage.
Tell me that story. I cannot
Okay.
believe we are 55 minutes into our discussion and you have not talked about being on stage with Bruce Springsteen.
Okay. So, all right. So my dad had passed away when I was 29 and that was in 2012. And then in 2014, I had this dream and I said when I woke up, I said, "Oh my God, this is so funny. Like that, like this would ever happen." In my dream, the song Dancing in the Dark was playing and he pulls me up on stage and dances with me.
As he
And,
does.
right. And I just laughed because I was like, it's, Courtney Cox, seen all of it. So I was laughing, went to work, and I totally forgot about it. And that's the thing. I was loose about it. I did not obsess over clinging to the need of an outcome. And I just thought, you know what? If it happens, great. If it doesn't happen, oh well. And then it was April 6th, 2014. So like a month later, he was doing the NCAA festival in Dallas, and it
Right.
was an outdoor concert.
I was there.
Yes. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was free, by the way.
Yes, it was.
Uh, that was almost 10 years ago, but
Yes.
I just want to say, out of all the Springsteen concerts I've been to and paid $50 for, plus service fees, I have to say this one, the free one, was the priceless one because he pulled me up on stage and he did it during that song and he danced with me. And I was on cloud nine for probably a good year.
I always like to preface this question with the amount of times you've seen Bruce live is not a fair barometer of how big of a fan you are, but it how many times have you seen him perform live?
Okay. So it's definitely less than 20
Okay.
because I'm 40 and or I'll be 40 in a couple of months because I'm a
Okay.
Pisces. So March. Um, so it's less than 20, but it's more than 12. I just lost count.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. What's the furthest you've traveled to see him?
Oh, Well, I don't know if it was really a a travel. When I was in college in Austin, I did drive to I think it was San Antonio one time or near there
Okay.
for like he had a like one of those intimate concerts from like the
Okay.
Devils and
Sure.
where it was just him
Yeah.
by himself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I saw
I
him
don't
in
remember.
Grand Prairie when he was here. He
Oh,
came to
wait,
Grand
that's what
Prairie.
it was. It was
Yeah.
Grand Prairie. I was like, it was a small little intimate setting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it was. I think I drove up here was what it, or
Hmm.
not, sorry. I think I'm
Yeah.
in Texas.
Dallas.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so I bet if we compared, we've gone to a lot of shows together that we just
I
didn't
think
know
that,
about it. Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
because
Um,
all of the shows were in Texas and
yeah.
me in Austin and Dallas. So yeah.
Do you have tickets for the new tour?
I do, and I will say I paid an arm and a leg for them, and um, yeah, I did.
What show are you going to?
The one in Columbus
Okay.
on March 9th, which is right next to my birthday is the 15th. So
Yeah,
it'll be, I said, you know what? This is my birthday gift to myself. I work hard and I deserve it. All of us went through some really crazy years these last few years. And
absolutely.
I said to myself, if I don't do this, I'm gonna regret it. And yeah, I put it on a credit card because I didn't have $1,000 just to, yeah. So so now I gotta pay it off.
Are you in a pit? Are you the pit one of the pits? Do you have a general admission ticket or
No, I am in like the what is it, the terrace level, like the very
okay,
first level.
okay.
Yeah. So
Hmm.
I I
So,
I made merchandise for the E Street with E Street Band on it. I made merchandise and put it on my online store, which is on my website. And 100% of the profits that I receive for the sale is going straight to Bruce funds.
oh, great. Yes.
Yeah. And
Donna.
I had a I so I mean I haven't raised a lot of money because I understand like people, maybe they can't
Yeah.
afford to buy t-shirts or
Yeah.
baseball caps. But yeah, like the shirts are like $25, the baseball caps are yeah, 20 to $30. And there's a whole bunch of stuff. I did like pet blankets and socks and mugs and tumblers. I did all kinds of stuff with different designs of E Street Band on it. And whatever my sales are, I'm literally taking 100% of that profit and just giving it to Bruce Funds. And I'm doing it on a monthly basis for a while because I feel bad for the fans. I'm not gonna lie, I'm disappointed. So I feel bad. And this was my way of trying to help.
Talk to me a little bit about that because I've had a lot of people on the podcast and some of them very disappointed in Bruce, some of them very angry with Bruce. Um, I I've had people that have said, I'm not going to renew my Springsteen license plate. I will not listen to E Street Radio again. I don't, if I got a free ticket, I wouldn't go. He's forgotten his common man. And, I don't get that because the amount of joy and, you know, I'm a cancer survivor. I went through a year of unemployment and, Bruce is what got me through this. Was one of the main songs that was on my F cancer playlist. I mean, Bruce is the companion on my life. And I, I just, I don't, I've made the joke. Okay, if you're unhappy with him, let him sleep on the couch for a little bit, but don't divorce him, right? So, what is your feelings about this? You said you're a little frustrated.
Well, first of all, congratulations on beating cancer. That's
Thank you.
amazing. Second of all, it, it's again, are you attached to the outcome? Because I love the music. I will always love the music. First and foremost, Human Touch, my most favorite song ever. Tunnel of Love album, my Darkness on the Edge of Town album is my most favorite, but
Okay.
Tunnel of Love is my second. I will never, ever, ever divorce my love for his music. Now, him as a person, I don't know him. I mean, sure, I got pulled up on stage, he danced with me, I got a few moments, but I don't talk to him every day. His bandmates are really sweet. And I felt so bad for them on Twitter when
Yeah,
people were taking it out on them because I'm thinking to myself, and I know, okay, yeah, I work in like the entertainment area. I know they had nothing to do with it, nothing.
exactly.
They,
Yeah,
yeah, Bruce is the boss for a reason. That's why we call him the boss.
exactly. Yes.
It was his decision, and just because he chooses something doesn't mean that you need to take it out on other people associated with him as, it's misplaced anger.
Yeah.
So I thought to myself, watching all of these tweets, me even tweeting saying I was disappointed because, yeah, his fan base has been the working person. And my best friend said something to me, and I thought about it, and I was like, you know what? I think she's right. She
Hmm.
said she's always heard that when entertainers sell their catalogs, that means they have mentally checked out and they're just in it for the money going forward. And I said, really? And then I thought about it for a while and I thought, you know what? That kind of makes sense because it's like, hey, I'm giving away my music. I no longer own it. Like, yeah, you're gonna pay me, but it's almost like, yeah, like I'm retired, but I'm still gonna have fun. And so even though I am disappointed that Bruce did not we went to the boss, right? As us fans, employees, we went to the boss. We
Yeah.
said, hey, this is not cool. Like we're the working people. And I agree. Like it doesn't matter how much money you have. Like if if you're subscribing to a vision and to a message, it does feel like a betrayal. And I was angry, but I wasn't angry at him as like his brand. I was angry more like Ticketmaster, how dare you? We all have gone through hard times. And Bruce, come on, be the boss. You're our boss. We go to you. Like you have all the power here. So why did Crowded House? Why did they say, "Hey, we're not going to do this dynamic thing. We're going to refund you guys for our tickets." Why didn't Bruce do the same thing? So I was disappointed.
Okay.
And again, I don't know him as a person, and who knows, maybe it went on his Broadway thing, maybe he was right when he said that, he's a one trick pony or whatever he said,
Yeah.
and said that, that this was like basically a thing he made up. And I think about it, and being in the working with people who are in the entertainment industry, they are so fake. And I'm not saying everybody, because there are some really, really good people, and I'm not saying Bruce is fake, but I'm just saying, like, people get attached to this idea of
The,
what a person
the
should be.
persona,
Yeah,
right? The
yeah,
outer persona. Yeah.
right. Yeah. And so it's like you don't know this person. Like a few years ago, I went on my social media and I was glad I voted for Biden. And I said, I'm so glad he's our president. I got death threats for it. And I got so mad because I got flooded with horrible things. And I got so mad. I got on a video and I said, listen, you look at me the way you want to see me, not the way I am.
Right.
My brand is, yes, a certain message in a certain way, but me myself, I'm just as complex as you guys. I'm a
Yeah.
human being. I'm not perfect. And so I look at Bruce like that. He's a human being. He's not perfect. Yeah, he has way more money than he ever needs. And so that's the part that disappoints me. But I thought, you know what? Out of all this anger on Twitter and everybody voicing their opinions and their, you know, sadness, whatever it is, I thought, well, what can I do to like help? And so I said, you know what? I have merchandise. I'm going to make some designs. I don't know if I'm going to sell any t-shirts or baseball caps or mugs or whatever. And thankfully people are buying them because they're getting a great shirt out of it to support the E Street Band, but they're also helping fans who need assistance when it comes to finances and getting tickets.
Yeah. Send me the link for that and I'll include it in the show notes. Yeah, what I was shocked when I reached out through a guest and they didn't answer me, but um, I said I would love Chris Christie on the show because he's a huge Springsteen fan and he grew up a Dallas Cowboy fan. And so I said, we could have a fun conversation. And a couple people said, no, I won't listen to that episode, Jesse. And I'm
Uh-huh.
like,
Yeah.
you know, uh,
But here's the thing. This is what I always tell
yeah,
people. Well, just because you look at something a specific way doesn't mean people outside of you also look at it the same way.
yeah,
Again, the universe exists simultaneously. Everything that you are going to experience in the next month, in the next week, in the next whenever, it's already happened. It's just how you chose to observe it and give it, like, entertain it,
yeah.
and focus on it. So even though I don't agree with Christie's career path, I his ideologies, I mean, he's a Bruce fan. Like, he enjoys the music, and you know what? That's okay.
So I will cut this out of the podcast because I don't want to embarrass anyone. So someone on Twitter reached, we were exchanging back and forth and I said, "Oh, you should be on the podcast." She goes, "Oh, I'd love to be on the podcast." And then I started noticing she's anti-vax. She's complaining about people dying because they're taking the vaccine. She's talking about how much she misses Trump and how Biden is an embarrassment. And I gave serious thought, Jaclyn, to, you know what? I'm not going to talk to her. This is just, and then I said, that's wrong. Come on, you're talking about be kind to each other. So,
Well, you
um,
said earlier that you liked, if you're smart, go into a
yeah,
room where people
right.
have different.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I do believe that being a moderate in most things in life. I
yeah,
I think that it's when you're extreme any direction,
yes,
regardless of the subject.
right,
I mean, it could be religion, politics.
right.
It could be it could be it could be just something at work.
Yeah.
If you're extreme, you're creating blind spots.
And so I said, fine. And we had a lovely conversation. She
Oh,
was a lovely person. It was really nice. Um, we didn't get into politics. She did say something about, I shoot myself off on Twitter sometimes, I'm letting off steam and it was just lovely. And I was telling my wife, I was really glad that I did this because it was nice. And so yeah, and I agree. I yeah, I don't know, like I've said this multiple times that there's one side of the scale is Bruce is totally a dumbass, has no knowledge of what's going on, and he's clueless. And the other end is he is this power hungry son of a bitch that wants to dream every penny out of his fan base. And the reality is it's somewhere in the middle, right? There is somewhere in the middle. And I believe what a lot of other people have said, that the whole Sony thing is for, he's 72. This is estate planning, right? Like he's got a kid who's an Olympic athlete. He's got another one that's a firefighter. The other one's in the music business. None of them want to manage his business.
well,
So
now we have grandkids, so
yeah, and now they're about
yeah.
to have a grandkid. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's great. And I hope that, and I will edit a lot of this out, even though I told you I just have a conversation. Um, but I
That's
do hope that, you know, when we are standing in front of that or sitting in our stage and they come out on stage, I hope that people will wash away and will, I have talked about, there are things I have problems with. I I think it's wrong. Like if I order an Uber and it's during surge pricing, it tells me this is 5 times the price. Ticketmaster doesn't do that. Ticketmaster doesn't say this base price is $120 and we're now charging you $1,000. We're doing 10 times surge pricing, and so and it is, I do think it's sad that it's kind of put a pall on some of the things. And so I'm hoping as we get closer that things will people will be a little less sore, that we won't be as, the bruise would have healed. And so we won't be so sensitive and it will just be able to enjoy the show. What do you think it's going to start with?
Well, it's funny you say that because you know how people always say Bruce when he comes out. So I'm
Yeah.
like, is it going to be Bruce or is it going to be Boo this time?
Yeah.
Like,
Good point. Yes. Yeah.
and I told my boyfriend, ex-boyfriend, who's a Gemini, I told him, I once we get there, I'm just gonna enjoy the music like I always do. And I said, yeah, I look at him a little differently now as a person, but I'm not gonna let the music put me in I'm not going to be in a bad mood and I'm not going to be
Yeah.
sour because yeah, like you said, I thought it was smart of him to sell his catalog because because you don't want your kids fighting over things, right?
Right. Yeah.
That's a good life.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I thought it was totally smart of him to do that. I just never thought about it in the way of where my best friend said that,
Yeah.
usually
I've never thought of that either. Yeah.
yeah, she's like,
Uh,
yeah, it's like retirement. And so now they're just doing it for the money and they're just doing it for the fun. They have nobody to impress anymore. That and it makes sense. So it's kind of like when you retire from your career, right? Like
yeah.
you retire at a certain age and at a certain level of your income, and you just say, you know what, I put in my time and I'm just gonna enjoy life now. And yeah, again, if you're extreme one way or another, regardless of the subject in life, you're going to create blind spots.
Yeah.
And so that's why I don't think he's like a horrible person for not putting his foot down. But
Yeah.
it's again, we don't know him. We don't
Yeah.
know him.
We don't know the circumstances.
Right.
Absolutely. All right. I had a podcast scheduled at 9, and I know that Michael is going like, come on, Jesse, let's go. So, but before I let you go, I got to ask you the Mary question. So, for those of you who are fans of Jaclyn's writing and you're joining us to hear her talk all things Bruce, and I will have to have you again. We've got, because we didn't get into favorite albums, songs you're chasing, concert memories. So if you're willing to come
And,
back, I
and
want
I
to have
still
you
have
come on again.
and I still have to give my answer about whether or not Mary gets into the car.
Absolutely. So that is the question. To preface this, in case you have never heard of the podcast before, Jay Armstrong is an honors English teacher that is recently retired, and he would take the song Thunder Road, break it apart as a poem, discuss the different lyrics and themes, and then at the end of the 2 days on his class, he would ask the question, does Mary get in the car? So Jaclyn, that is your question. Does Mary get in the car at the end of Thunder Road?
I'm going to say yes, because again, earlier I was talking about how Bruce sings for the underdogs, and I root for the underdogs. And given the lyrics, it's like this man is like, please get in the car. You've done what you needed to do. You've gotten your schooling. Like you're an adult now. Let's go really live our lives. And so I'm going to say yes. I'm a positive, optimistic person, and I'm going to say she gets in the car.
I love that answer. Thank you so much. Jaclyn, I will have you on again. I look forward to checking out the books, checking out the podcast. Thank you so much for your time. Hopefully we can see each other at a show. And I hate now that we didn't connect when you're living in Dallas, so we could
I
break a
know.
meal together. So thank you so
Yeah.
much. Once again,
Thank
tell people how to reach you.
themanifestit.com.
Yeah, go check there. Tell them Set Listing Bruce sent you. Go buy some merch. It will go to the wonderful Donna from Bruce Funds that is doing good work for a lot of people. And so that is a great thing to do. I love the idea of taking some frustration and saying, well, what can I do to make the world a better place? So good for you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go talk to your doctor, get vaccinated, get boosted, and let's be kind to each other because that's how we'll get through this. Thank you, Jaclyn. Thank you, listeners. We'll talk to you soon. Goodbye. Doing a podcast at times can be a one-way conversation, and I hate that. So please let me know what you like and don't like about the work I'm doing. You can reach the podcast via email at setlustingbruce@gmail.com. The show is on Twitter at setlustingbruce, and my personal Twitter is at jessejacksondfw. You can support the podcast by subscribing via your favorite podcast player and leaving us a review. The more reviews we have, the easier it is for people to find us. And please tell a friend about the podcast, especially if they love Bruce or music, because it will make a difference. You just heard the fun talking, hard rocking, music loving, album ranking, fan thinking, joy spreading, lyric reading, story sharing podcast that is the one, the only, Set Listing Bruce. The theme for Set Listing Bruce was written by David Rosen, used by permission.